And then I take the take.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I guess yeah, but I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't want to okay. Yeah. Where?
I'm from South.
I see.
I'm from. Yeah, it's like the Baker.
I speak on oh, that's yeah. I like because
Yeah, I mean,
that's a lot more. I do something like so. There's just a scratch. I do. I play on internet.
Exactly, but especially depending on the and recommendation. It's 2 days. First, I'm back to 2 days.
Hi, Victor. Thanks for moderating.
I need to go to this like.
How long have you been here?
Oh, there is.
And Daphne, yeah, I think they're doing more of a. Yeah, that's awesome. What ERP is doing more of a technology.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I have like a very diverse background. So I came to AMS as a IT manager, so my role was mainly with developers and then offices, helping operations, office operations.
Oh, so we could see ourselves.
Full of joy.
Well, I'd love to talk to you more about it. I'm excited. There's these different components of ARP and then like, I never knew this is the whole.
Massive, yeah. I might laugh.
All of these terms from here are sweet. Welcome to the world. Oh.
You're gonna grab the whole page? You know, like, ARP as well. I know it's so big, but she's more on the.
Oh, no. I mean, we're starting.
Did you really know about that? They're like-
Yes.
Okay.
She's great.
I work with so many ARP, so I understand.
Okay.
Don't bother.
Fails to proceed.
Yeah.
It's a long process.
There's like these reporters.
We're gonna go ahead and start. I first of all just want to apologize because I know by now you all have been fed. And for some reason, we had issues with the catering and delivery. And I think we are gonna have food in about another 10-15 minutes. But once it arrives, feel free to just walk over, grab a plate and continue listening. And I apologize to our panelists who are probably gonna have to eat at the end. So good evening and welcome to CAPAL's Washington Leadership Program. My name is Shama Ahmed and I'm the Managing Director at CAPAL. At CAPAL, we cultivate ANHPI public service leaders by providing formative professional experiences and growth opportunities. This includes our public service scholarship and internship program, which we refer to as the S&I program, a roundtable series, a mentorship program, and also tonight's Washington Leadership Program. Our 2025 WLP series was pulled together by a group of S&I alumni who worked together for several months to plan out, the topics and reach out to the outreach to speakers and put this wonderful series together for you all. Tonight's session is called From Boomers to Gen Z, Navigating Intergenerational Conversations. It will revolve around how to navigate intergenerational conversations about topics such as political identity and how it relates to voter identity, voting patterns, and etc. There will be an audience survey that we're going to provide to you all towards the end of the session, and please respond to that. It really matters in terms of your feedback, and it also directly correlates to our future funding. So after that, we will also follow it with a Q&A session, which we will have from you all in the audience and also our audience members that are joining virtually. So we encourage you to follow and join our conversation tonight on social media using the hashtag #WeAreCAPAL. Thank you to our speakers and panelists this evening for spending their time with us and to all of you for joining us. And also a very special thank you to our 2025 Washington Leadership Program sponsor, the DC Mayor's Office on API Affairs, MOAPIA, for making programs like tonight's possible for CAPAL, and a special thank you to API Vote and this for hosting us this evening. It is now my distinct pleasure to turn over the floor to our panelists to kick off tonight's session.
Hi, everyone. I'm a little soft-spoken, so if you're in the back, raise your hand and I'll speak louder. My name is Catalina Calachan. I'm a business technology manager at AALP, and I have the privilege of being the moderator tonight. So I'm going to get into the questions soon, but before we do that, definitely want our esteemed guests to introduce themselves. We'll keep it quick for now, just name, organization, and I guess which generations you identify with. That might be fun. I'm second generation. I'm a Filipino American and a millennial. And then after that, I'll have some quick hand raising, polling questions for you all, and then we'll get into the question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Victor Yang. I lead public policy for the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging, also known as NAPCA. We represent Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander older adults, and I identify as a second generation Chinese American.
Hi, I'm Twit Duong. I'm the Chief Policy and Government Affairs Officer at National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, or NAPHOF. And we work to empower women and girls, API, AHPI, women and girls across America. And I think I was born right at the beginning of millennial, but I'm probably more Gen X. And I'm kind of like first generation. Both of my parents were refugees from Vietnam.
Hello, my name is John Yang. I'm the President and Executive Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. We're a DC-based civil rights organization. I would identify myself as a first-generation Chinese American born in Taiwan, and I am at the very beginning of Gen X, I guess, and perhaps considered, depending on definition, I might actually be considered a baby boomer. I don't feel that way.
Yeah, so since this is a conversation about intergenerational conversations, I thought it would be fun to kind of do a quick poll and see, first of all, raise your hand if you are familiar with the terms we've been using about first generation, second generation, sometimes 1.5 generation. Okay, yeah. So most people are familiar with those terms. And then going off of that question, who identifies as, if you feel comfortable sharing, who identifies as first generation? Raise your hand. Second generation. And some people like the term 1.5 generation. Yeah. So, but yeah, so we have a lot of different perspectives in the room. Happy to have you guys all here. But then talking about generation in a slightly different sense as it pertains to age. Do you know which generational cohort you're a part of? You were saying millennial, boomer. Raise your hand if you kind of know which one you fall into. Yeah, so it's interesting because it is so integrated into our culture. It's, all around us. You see news articles about, boomers beefing with millennials or Gen Z and Gen X and blah, blah, blah. But the boundaries and the delineations are actually quite fuzzy, and it's really shaped by media and culture. But understanding how we identify with, or maybe even take issue with, the labels that have been assigned to us, can be really helpful just as we navigate the conversations we have with such diverse audiences. So being aware of those assumptions that shape our interactions is really helpful, and help us find ways to connect across age or experience or cultural upbringing. So I think we'll probably just jump right into the questions then. Oh, actually, last thing before we get into it, as we go through this, I think it's helpful for you to think about in the back of your mind, maybe instances when you've had a conversation or a moment with someone that had a different, generational identity than you, second generation, first generation, older than you, younger than you. And like, do you have any moments that really stick with you where there was difficulty communicating across those lines? Like maybe it's your parents, maybe it's a coworker. But sit about that, think about that, and maybe at the end you can share out with us. But I think food's still not here yet, so we can jump in. So panelists, could you share a little bit more about yourself? So what do you currently do at your organization and what led you to where you are today? Maybe we'll start at the end this time.
Sure. So like I said, I'm the executive director of AHAC, which is a civil rights organization. How I describe our organization is that we advocate, we educate, and we empower. When I say advocate, here being in DC, part of advocacy is your work on the Hill, trying to educate. I don't always say lobby because lobby has certain connotations, but educate our lawmakers about what's important to our Asian American community on any number of issues. For us, the issues include immigration, education, civil rights more generally, voting, census, national security as it pertains to civil rights, technology issues. Advocacy for us also includes litigation. So we do litigate. We have currently, I think, 5 lawsuits against this administration alone. So that is on birthright citizenship, on voting, on grants, on another grant case, and then I'm missing one, I think. But diversity, actually, our first lawsuit against the administration was on the diversity, equity, and inclusion executive board. So those are the types of advocacy efforts that we do. On educate, what I mean by that is both education in terms of doing research. So we do some research as it pertains to the Asian American community, knowing that our community is under-researched. The data on our community is underdeveloped, right? But it's also education includes making sure that our narrative is told correctly, especially to the media. So I'm proud of the fact that like early on during COVID-19, we, along with a number of our Asian American organizational colleagues, really pushed hard against the media to say COVID-19, to say coronavirus, don't use China virus, don't use Wuhan flu, because we knew the stigma that would be attached. We were part of the effort to make sure that the term chain migration was not used during the 2017 debates around immigration. So when I say educate, that's what I'm talking about. Is how do we educate the community about our narrative? And then when I say empower, it's how do we continue to empower our community, build capacity? So my organization's fortunate, we subgrant about $1.52 million a year to smaller community organizations to do the hard work that they need to do. Because we're a national organization, we're based in DC. We know that we live in a bubble. And some of the best work that is done in local communities. And so how do we foster that? How do we continue to develop that? So that's the work of our organization. So I'm the executive director. So nominally I head the organization. We have a staff of about 40 people that does all of this work. How did I get here? So I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, which in itself kind of scares me when I say that because I don't feel that old. I started here in DC. I was at a law firm for about 16 years. I was a partner at a law firm doing litigation, commercial litigation, boring stuff around insurance. Although frankly, I thought it was fascinating. So one quick tidbit, don't close doors. Because I never thought of myself as a corporate lawyer, but I found that experience to be rewarding. I built connections from that I use to this day. One of the FCC commissioners was a former law school classmate of mine that she and I knew each other. Another classmate was the FEC chair. So you never know, right? So I spent time first doing that. Then I went overseas to China. I served as the general counsel for the Asia Pacific region of an American Fortune 200 company. So I do speak Chinese fluently. I was born in Taiwan, moved here when I was little, but common to my experience at that time, our parents taught us Chinese, forced us to do it, and I hated it at the time, but it came back so helpful when we relocated to China. I still had a tutor to really understand legal language, right? But one of my proudest moments, even to this day, is being able to do an acquisition of a small company, and I did the documents both in Chinese and English. To this day, I actually think that my formal Chinese is much better than my slang Chinese. So I could talk about injunctions, damages, compensatory relief in Chinese. But if you ask me any sort of slang, no clue, right? That applies generationally too, so we could talk about that later. And then I spent a little bit of time in the government. I spent time in the Obama administration serving as Secretary Pritzker's advisor, senior advisor for Asia. So in the secretary's office, basically her policy engagements with Asia, I was involved in all of that. Again, I was fortunate, I got to use my Chinese. So that might make you think, well, why did you go to a civil rights organization? And the other aspect of my story is that I was always involved in the Asian American community. You know, I grew up in Chicago at a time when there were very few Asian Americans. So actually, when I came to DC, I started finding a community. I just really wanted to be part of it. So similar to all of you, I joined, you know, like these types of organizations. So I joined APAPA. APAPA is the Asian Pacific American Bar Association, and got to know that. Then I volunteered with OCA. I ended up being general counsel of that organization for a while. Then I got involved in my organization on the board side. So all of that was part of my upbringing as well. And then it actually was, and I don't mean this as a political statement, but the first Trump administration that caused me to do this. I've been executive director here for a little bit over 8 years now. I started the 6 days after Trump was inaugurated. I took this job probably about 3 or 4 weeks after Trump was elected. Why I did that was one other aspect of my life is that I was an undocumented immigrant. So when Trump said that he was running for president, that first speech, he talked about illegal immigrants, his words, being rapists, gangsters, and drains on our society. I did take it personally. Obviously, he wasn't really talking about me, but I was thinking about sort of our communities, right? And what it meant to have a president that had that worldview. So I decided to lean in that direction at that time. 8 years later, I have no regrets. The fight is hard, but I have no regrets.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Right. My career, I'll start at the beginning and then I'll go into what I do. But my career started in Texas, as a immigration attorney. And I wanted to just give back to the community. I wrote my law school essay. I don't know if you all are thinking about law school, but about helping immigrants and refugees. So I took a very tiny, small nonprofit job serving trafficked women and survivors of domestic violence. And I was there for about 2 years, and then Hurricane Katrina hit, and I was working with a lot of folks from DC who came in, swooped in, and tried to do a lot of advocacy and hearings. And one person named Juliet Choi, who's with this curious organization called Asian American Justice Center, came down and we started talking a lot. And I was feeding her information for her federal advocacy. And then maybe a month later, a person named Vincent Ang came down to this small clinic that I was at and put literally an offer. This doesn't happen. It's like Godfather style. Offer a letter doubling my tiny salaries. Like, we'll take you as staff attorney if you come, because Julia's leaving us for American Red Cross. So my mom was like, get the hell out of here. She wanted me out of this puny nonprofit job, but I grew a lot in it, by the way, and I highly recommend it, that kind of experience when you're young and poor. So I flew up and I joined the Asian American Justice Center under Karen Narsaki, and you were on the board then, John. And so under It's Small World, and that's how my career in DC grew. And I think DC is about who you know, because at the dawn of the Obama administration, a lot of folks in Homeland Security wanted advocates in Homeland Security. So I joined the Civil Rights Office, and then the Obama administration folks in the White House Initiative were like, we need some immigration people come over. So I was in under Daphne Kwok, who's your boss now, and staffing the commission. So and then, I went abroad during Trump 1.0. We wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. We did the opposite. My husband became a diplomat, and we wanted to take our 3 kids abroad to see the world, and expand their minds during a time when people wanted the world to narrow. And so I was at the State Department for a bit, and then I came back and joined NAPOP, and I called Isra, who I work with in the Obama administration, like, I need a job. She's like, I got one. So, I think DC, that goes to show, again, don't close your doors. Stay friends with your friends.
And don't make enemies.
And don't make enemies. So that's how I got here, and it's been a really fun, unexpected, almost story kind of career that I did not intend to go. I intended to just do immigration law in Texas for the rest of my life. But these things happen, and I unexpectedly have a knack for advocacy, even though my dad was like, don't ever get involved in politics ever. If anybody is a parent, daughter, or son, or child of a refugee, your parents don't want you involved in the government because they were persecuted by them. My dad was in prison after the Vietnam War for a year in their concentration camp after. So he was like, don't get involved. But he was okay. He changed his mind. But at NAPOF, as the Chief Policy and Government Affairs Officer, I run our policy department. We have about 5 of us. We work on a range of issues that impact A and HPI women and girls, including economic justice, equal pay, and access to healthcare and access to reproductive healthcare. We're doing a lot of work at the Hill right now because we have to educate the Hill about some of our visionary ideas. And then we are kind of doing some more legal advocacy work with our partners as well, but a lot of our work is that way. And then also we have a research component where we do a lot of qualitative research as well, including polling and qualitative research. We have a report on medical abortion on our in our webpage, if you go to that, which talks about kind of the barriers to medical abortion. And we've done some reports on access to reproductive health care in Georgia and Chicago, which I can talk about more too. But it's been a couple of years now. It's been really fun. It's very adventurous and rocky in this administration, and we can talk more about it, but I'm going to pass it over now that I've gone over the 2 prompts.
Out of curiosity, how many of you all are in college? Oh, wow. Okay. So I asked that question because I'm a little younger on this panel. And so I thought I would start with how I got to where I am from when I was in college. And so I went to Syracuse University, graduated in 2016. And at the time, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I really wanted to work in Asian American nonprofits. I graduated with a degree in education. And so my first job out of college was at a nonprofit in Boston's Chinatown, doing education and social services for children of immigrants and kind of helping them to kind of understand how to navigate the education system, because a lot of times the parents didn't speak English. And when I was there, I was also kind of getting involved in politics because I realized that, a lot of times the politics and the policies that are created are the ones that are really helping immigrant families. And it was also there where I first heard about NAFTA, ironically, where I work now. And I had learned about NAFTA because I was at this organization. We're struggling to communicate with parents that spoke Cantonese. And so we hired some older adults to do Cantonese to Mandarin translations. I'm a Mandarin speaker, just like John, and was able to talk with the older adults, and then they would later talk to the parents in Cantonese. And that's how we would communicate. It's a kind of unique issue that doesn't really exist as much anymore because a lot of Cantonese speakers now can speak Mandarin. And so that was kind of like my first perspective into nonprofit work. And then afterwards, I found an opportunity to come to DC, was able to get an internship on the Hill, work on the Hill, and then I was able to also work in the administration, the previous administration. And so when I took the job at NAPCO, it was really like a full circle moment, right? Because in this job that I'm working in now, I'm advocating for this older adult worker program that my nonprofit that I first started at used. And I'm able to see the connection between how impactful that program was in our communities. And that's why I love doing this job each and every day, because every day that I walk onto the Hill, or I previously was engaging with the administration, and they asked me, hey, like, why is this program so important to the population that you represent? I can tell them, hey, like, I'm from the community, I saw the impacts of this program, and now within this DC bubble, I'm able to advocate more effectively on why this program is important. So my day job is basically to advocate for our senior community service employment program, the program that I just described to you all. And it's also making sure that we are participating in other worker training programs, such as one that we do with EPA called the Environmental Employment Program, Senior Environmental Employment Program, and then also to advocate for the needs of A and HPI older adults, such as language translation, a lot of time data disaggregation, just different ways for older adults to have more access to healthcare services. And a lot of our older adults are obviously under Medicare and Medicaid. So it's a really fun job. It's one I've been doing for the last 2.5 years now. And we hope to continue doing this work during this administration.
Well, thank you all. I was jotting down a lot of notes because I was hearing a lot of similar themes. I think I heard a lot about the importance of, connecting to our culture. You're mentioning the language, sort of leaning on our community, and how, this circle really does get smaller and smaller. All the different organizations and connections just on this panel are pretty incredible. We touched a little bit about the intergenerational differences too, which is, our parents might have different career paths in mind for us, or different experience or comfort level even with engaging in politics, or speaking up and being activists. But also just this deep connection that all of you have, and that I think we share in the room here, to making an impact and in public service, and how that's sort of like the heartbeat of like what we're all doing here. And with that, looks like the food is arriving. Anna, should we pause now, or it's kind of a nice breaking point? You think?
Yeah, you can pause now.
Okay, so yeah, since the food is arriving, I will respect everyone's hungry stomachs before we continue, but then we'll dive back in. I'll just give a quick blurb while they're setting up over here. I am a business technology manager at AARP. AARP works to ensure that we can all thrive as we age. So health, wealth, and self. They do a number of different programs, advocacy, different events, just a lot going on. I'm personally within our Community, State, and National Affairs group, CSN. So we have 53 state offices around the country. And I'm in a technology role now, but have a deep passion for local communities and all the work that AARP is doing to improve the lives of older adults, like safe streets, affordable housing, all sorts of different things. So happy to talk later more about my experience, and what brought me here. You can snag me and I'm happy to chat. But I will take a break for now. They're all quite hungry. We got a lot of questions, but we'll do our best to get through as much as we can, and then hopefully there's still like 10 to 15 at the end for questions, so we can listen to all your voices. An awkward moment.
Pizza.
Pizza.
Well, we could talk a bit, but I don't think it's.
Oh, good, yeah, that's true.
Or they're hungry.
Yeah, I feel like once we get into it, it's gonna be.
After.
Let's see. There.
Maybe I'll just hold people while we're waiting.
Yeah.
So how many people are from around here? Like as in DC, Maryland, Virginia?
Oh, that's a great question.
Okay, so only about 4-ish. And then how many people, I'm gonna go to the opposite end, West Coast or beyond? What?
Wait, what is and beyond?
Well, Hawaii, Pacific Islands, right?
Southern, Midwest?
Right, okay, oh, a fair number of Midwesterners, South,
Oh, where?
a handful.
Texas?
Oh, the one Georgia, what Georgia? Okay, Texas, okay, all right.
So it's pretty diverse geographically. How many people are like, I kind of want to understand the interest in like STEM, law, and different interest or public interest or government.
How many of you are interning on the Hill?
Okay,
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay. About four-ish.
How many of you want to do public policy work? Oh,
Right, almost majority.
who wants to be a lawyer? But I don't recommend it.
No, hey, no, okay, well, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, so I am, right, obviously, I am a lawyer, although I don't really practice, right? But I'm still a big fan of being a lawyer, or at least getting a JD, right? I mean.
What about the business return on it, Donna?
Well,
Fight.
no. Hannah, the food ready?
So if you guys wanna grab a plate and then we can, take like a 5-minute break and then. we
Was
can
it like
resume
a
the
third of them
session.
that wanted
Okay,
to go along?
sounds good. So-
About.
Oh, okay.
Not quite.
I love this contrast though, because I feel like sometimes in DC there's a bias with people, like people who are lawyers who do public policy. Nice to get your perspective on work.
Hey, it's gonna be working. AI is gonna take over, Airleaf and do most of the work. And you have to really want to be like an IT lawyer to make more money or partner. But it's not do public policy, like a lot of people do it without like a public policy degree or a MBA. You don't have to worry.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
How to handle.
You know, Vincent to this Capitol legislative drafting class, and I feel like they're lost in 3 days in a way.
Well,
The 700K I paid over to the university.
that's fair.
Well, if you guys wanna grab like a bite to eat, you guys are welcome to, have to grab something. Alright.
You have to kind of figure that out.
Yeah. Miserable though.
Back when you all went to law school, was it our language on there?
Yeah.
Stay.
Right.
It's a good school. I also was a kid on a lot faster.
Right, the differential between, like, what it costs to go to law school versus starting college. Like, well, now, the law school cost good, starting salary, having increase, something like this.
Yeah, the business.
It's unless you have a big law, big laws in any place. Yeah,
It's like the top 10% of the class was.
correct, if that, right?
Drastically change their business model.
Yeah, that's a fair point, I think that is.
And that is actually means strength. That means strength. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they need to change their curriculum. It's not really practice.
That's fair.
As someone who's thinking about going to academia, to make it more practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, very strong. Being out there in the corporate sector, I think, I feel like I should have gotten an MBA. Or like, I would advise my son. Yeah. Hopefully you run out there, you got a hospital, see an MBA. Yeah.
They're both ways to save money.
Also, there is a certain category.
It is,
Right.
in this town.
Right, this now, that's fair too, this now, that's right, right.
I think it's getting niche. It's getting kind of niche. I think we should have a heated discussion, be more in the
But that's the thing, like, I,
We agree with each other, so far.
I'm more interested in what they want.
Yeah.
Right, so like, we could be pretty open-ended, I would say, let them.
Intern has with two interns and they all, they all for women, they all understand. So all the people trying to go to law school.
Yeah, and I have to be careful because you're right, like, part of this is generational, and like, my concept of return on investment is gonna be different than than what it is now.
I lost it when I talked to voters and see they know they can. And look at my bias. You're the majority.
Oh, definitely the majority.
I feel like it's because I meet a lot of lawyers in Boston, but if I was just like, I need a lawyer practicing law, I could work it.
No, I met the last intern talk I did a week ago. There was a Harvard law attorney, I law, and he was miserable. He said, no. Absolutely not. Harvard law grad, IP attorney, thinking it, no. He's so. And I think it's something to be said, because this is generation years ago, right? They learned about quality of life through COVID. They learned how nice it is to be having so there's a lot of things that- and I don't believe it was like.
But it's awesome, it's like, something like that, like, but then dynamics that might happen.
I tell you, there's a disadvantage to it, right? You have more complicated. And they are much more digitally and more likely to do They were used to pick up.
Yeah.
So, yes, I see that.
This conversation.
I know. Yeah.
We just combined the first couple, they're all.
Yeah.
kind of-
No, exactly.
Yeah, because I think we have 10 years between us. So I graduated in 2000. I've been at Chinese 20 years. So we're literally a generation, like 3 different, he's like.
2015, but I was constantly talking.
So where are we?
So we're like.
Yeah.
People have gotten here, so we can start.
Partnership, no, it's.
Take care of them.
Yeah.
I even at home, I gotta get myself in the sack.
I know.
You know.
And they're listening, I tell people. We're gonna try to get started now that you have some food. So we want this to be an open conversation too, and so, let us know if you have any questions. I think we're open to kind
Yeah.
of being fluid with this, so. But yeah, one thing that we just realized while talking to each other here was that we sort of have like a 10-year gap between us and then each of us here, so like we graduated college in 2016, 15.
2001.
Law school in 1992.
So we've got a broad range of
Yeah.
perspectives here. But okay, so just to kick it off, can you guys speak about the diversity of lived experiences within NHPI communities when it comes to both age and or time spent living in the US? And you can talk a little bit about, patterns and trends that you've noticed when it comes to working with folks from different generations, whether that's NHPI communities or just more broadly in the workplace or elsewhere.
Much.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack
Now
there.
that you say it like that. Oh my gosh.
So Victor started on the first one, I started on the second one, so.
Okay. I think I'll start broadly with some of, it's been interesting. DC is a big polling town, and so I will start with that and just spout some polling that I found very interesting lately. So Celinda Lake, who is a big pollster in town and a lot of political firms use her, she polled on kind of all the issues related to working women, gender expansive individuals, and EEO, like DEI. A lot of the women's rights groups are funded now by Melinda Gates Foundation called the Pivotal Foundation, and we're in this campaign called 75 million to talk about working women and push against the attacks on DEI. And so as a precursor to this, she did some polling and talked about some things, and I'll just kick it off. But she talked about how the folks that were 50 and above really didn't understand equity. They still thought equity was their home living. I honestly think that applies to like my dad too. Like this is not just like Caucasian or Black or anything, like they polled a broad demographic, for instance. They also said that this silver hair generation are gonna be the main folks who vote in the next couple of cycles. They're the biggest set of voters. And that's also something we should think about as we look at where our country is and where it might be in a few years. She also said that men care about caregiving, but women by far and large care most, and women my age in their forties, I gave away my age, are the most worried about juggling caregiving for family and children and working. So that I want to kick it off with that. And then NAPOF worked with our Latina and our Black partner to do an intersectional polling between 500 Black women voters, 500 API women voters, and 500 Latina voters last year. And for API women and gender expansive individuals, across all age groups, 80% believe race was an issue. So there was agreement across all generations that race is still an issue and people get discriminated against. There was strong agreement, 80% above, and Cylinda Lake did our polling for that too, by the way. Across all generations that access to birth control was important. There's strong agreement across all age groups that affordability to healthcare was really important as well. I will be frank with you, and we sent both polling to both political parties, and we did not get really much of a response. And the thing is, like, it hurts me because the affordability message could have been tacked on to, let's say, the abortion message or access to reproductive health care. When I talk to different generations in our community, they respond to access to healthcare, access to reproductive health care more than access to abortion. So that's just a starter in terms of just sheer numbers. I do think that a lot of these mindsets and these, and so Linda's polling also got to social issues. A lot of people who were polled across her poll were just like, they're tired of social issues. We want to focus on the economics. What am I going to get out of this? And I think that is at the source of, a lot of the generational divide, right? But there's a focus on the yield of something, what's in it for me. And then those of us there's a large group in our generation, especially in the nonprofit sector, that don't think that way. They think about values, they automatically go to social justice, and they grew up absorbing more in social media than in, and also a large swath of the generations missed a lot of schooling too, right? And so I think a lot of that kind of information and absorption of generations of knowledge of values is playing out differently in that way. And I think in the nonprofit sector, especially when it's Asian American, Pacific Islander nonprofits, and I've been in quite a few, about 3 in my career, where it's run by APIs for APIs, you see that kind of intergenerational tensions playing out inside the organization and in the community, right? And it's never very clean. It's always kind of messy. I can tell you lots of crazy stories about the Vietnamese community. But I'm sure some of you that watch Vietnamese YouTube already know this. And I know more slang in Vietnamese than legal term. Even though I counseled my clients in immigration law, I lost a lot of that terminology. So I know much more because I spent a lot of time in Asia. In the diplomatic family, we went to Asia and I learned more food and slang terms than I know legal terminology or policy terms. But yeah, so I'll start with that.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, thank you. I just want to highlight one point before we go on to, you were mentioning the caregiving piece, and I think that's really important. Have you guys heard of the term sandwich caregiver? So sandwich caregiver, refers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but refers to folks that may be taking care of a parent or an older adult loved one as well as a child. So for a long time, my mom fell in that category when she was taking care of me and my grandma. But that's a huge portion of the population. I think especially, a lot of A and HPI households, people are dealing with a lot of those kind of struggles. It's hard to get respite, et cetera, et cetera. Victor, I saw you writing down some stuff. Do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah, no, I mean, that sandwich generation analogy is, so important because, you're kind of squeezed from both sides, caring for your older parent as well as your younger child. But yeah, no, I was definitely taking on some notes. I think, when I think about working in our community with the older adults and the younger generation, I think about like a lot of the work that we do at NAPCA, because like we're working with older adults all the time. And seeing how they have a different perspective than we do, especially if they're recent immigrants, like focusing on kind of like the stability, focusing on family, focusing on like making a new life like within this country. Whereas the younger generation, I feel like we are definitely have like different lived experiences, maybe are more open to trying new things. Not to say that we're not as focused on that stability, but like we want to kind of carve our own path and do something a little bit different. And so I think that those lived experiences, especially since some of us who are in that 1.5 or second generation who spent more time in this country feel more comfortable, kind of carving our own path and doing something different than our parents. Like I feel like that's like one of the big differences, and especially it's a big difference with like the time spent in the country, right? Because we maybe have been exposed to more of this country and the opportunities that it presents itself, and so we're kind of more willing to do things that are a little bit more, I guess, riskier, for lack of a better word. And I also think like a lot of it comes to just like understanding of a lot of the social structures in the system, which is what NAPA does a lot for older adults, right? Like a lot of times we're doing things such as like a digital skills class. We work really closely with AHC on that, or we do like a financial literacy class for our older adults. And it's part of like just because a lot of the older adults that we serve just haven't spent a lot of time in the US, and so they aren't used to. And some of you guys will learn this soon, like, contributing to like a 401k or starting like a Roth IRA, or just understanding how to like open up a computer and like word processing software, and being able to like, go to like, I don't know, like Fiverr or something and like freelance, right? And so I think that part of that generational divide between like, stability and kind of like doing something on your own is maybe sometimes a lack of awareness to technology and understanding the systems that kind of like, are around us and how you kind of use them to kind of do things a little bit differently than the other generation.
I mean, I think this is another area that you just listen to us talk about it. Like, so Celinda Lake does some great polling data, but the problem is like there's just not enough of it, right? Especially when it comes to the Asian American community. And even when we talk about these generational issues, there's no polling, there's no data on this. I mean, we could all talk to you anecdotally about, we oftentimes talk about like the diversity of the Asian community, the fact that we have 50 different ethnicities, 100 different languages. That's sort of a stock phrase that all of us use. But we don't talk about what that means in terms of first generation versus second generation. Because if you think about, when I think about like right now, the first generation Chinese Americans that are coming over right now, right? The ones that are actually, they probably came over as students, they're in their 40s or 50s, they are having kids, right? That are teenagers. Some of you are probably products of these types of families. How they think about immigration, public safety, education, is different than how you all, I think, are thinking about it, even how our organizations think about it. And how do we bridge that divide, right? Because I'm going to use education as an example here. I think all of our organizations are pretty, whether you want to say pro-affirmative action, pro-race-based admissions, recognize that there is something there that we need to recognize a racial inequity. For our parents' generation, that generally was not the case, right? First generation people, generally not the case. They believe in what is called merit. But now when we talk about merit, even when we talk about merit with the first generation, if we talk about it in the right way, they recognize that merit has to include some of the racial inequities. But you have to tease it out of them in a way that you can't do by just simply saying merit, or can't do by simply saying race. Because for them, and this is a product, and this is where the theme I'm going to come back to. For them, the notion of merit means test and grade. Where do they get that? It's because in China, there's what's called a Gaokao, the one test. Korea has the same system. Japan has the same system. Like So that's what they're a product of, that they equate merit with grades and tests, right? And as a result, we have to work with them, educate, not lecture, but educate and talk to them about that. It's the same thing when it comes to things like even just racial equality, right? I had, like we both had the benefit of living in foreign countries, so we know what foreign media does. Like if you live in mainland China, and I'll admit I'm biased, but there's a clear bias in my mind against African Americans. So for people of our parents' generation, if they're first generation coming over, it's not that they're racist, it's that's what they were taught. So how do we talk to them about racial equality? How do we talk to them who have never experienced what African Americans did during the civil rights movement to bring us all the rights that we have? How do we talk to them about that, right? And have those honest conversations. I think that's why recognizing that where you come from, the generations, and how you came here is also important, right? Because it's not just about first generation versus second generation. A first generation Vietnamese American is going to be very different than the current first generation Chinese American, right? Chinese American, again, I'm going to pick on my own people in some ways, right? First generation Chinese American, oftentimes they came here as a student or they already came here as a business person, right? They already had means. They were already middle class at a minimum, right? Or in a particular position. Whereas if you're talking about the 70s, first generation Vietnamese American, Laotian, Hmong, they're refugees. So their lived experiences are going to be very different, right? Even when it comes to how they view immigration. So understanding all of those, so like all of you, I saw a majority of people that were interested in policy. Think about how all of these things affect the policy ways people think about policy, right? Among a lot of Asian Americans, when we talk about immigration, they actually, surprisingly perhaps, the polling on this shows that they do think that the border is a concern or that we do need to tighten up the borders and that people should be coming here the right way. Again, we have to break that down. Like I've talked to Chinese Americans again in particular, and they said, well, I came here the right way. And then I asked them, well, how did you come here? Well, it's because I was a student during Tiananmen Square, and so they gave me refugee status. Okay, so they changed the law. You would have been illegal, using that terminology, until the government changed the policy. So what is it different about what's happening right now, right? So you have to meet them where they're at and be empathetic, but then say, hey, that's why we're trying to design a society in a different way. So when I think about generations, and I think about the different experiences, I always think about sort of where they're coming from, what their mindsets might be, and then sort of figure out those values and then kind of be able to have a conversation from there.
Thank you. I feel like I could listen to you guys talk all day. Some of the themes I was writing down from that are that demographics are changing. I believe now 1 in 5 Americans are over the age of 65. So we're seeing that percentage of the population, grow at a faster pace than, the younger ones. So that's important to keep in mind. Data matters. The polling, outside of my work at AARP, I'm on the Commission on Aging in Arlington County. We run into the data issue all the time, whether it's trying to fix sidewalks and understand, mobility challenges and different things like that. There's just not great data that exists and people don't know how to get the resources they need. So that's a key thing. And then also, of course, we're just products of our environment. So I really like what you said about having empathy and grace and trying to kind of unpack some of the why, why our parents or others might have certain assumptions. We all come to this, because of different experiences and background. But I want to combine a couple questions. I want to kind of focus a little bit more on that finding common ground issue. And so thinking about all these differences that we have across generations and any way you define generation, what common threads have you seen within NHPI communities, whether that's around family, resilience, cultural pride, or something else? And how do those connection points and shared experiences help bridge those gaps? And I think I'm going to tack on to that, what approaches or tools or mindsets have helped you engage? So just, a big question around how do you bridge that divide? What tools do you use? What have you seen that unites us that can help us across? Maybe I'm gonna start with you this time, Victor.
Sure. Yeah, I think like common themes that at least I've seen is like things that are very, what's the best word for it? Like very relatable, right? Like opportunities where you see like, or it's like a common struggle almost where like you can see how someone else is going through something similar that you went through, and that's something that brings you all together. Like I think a great example of this is like one of the things that NAPA does is to kind of bridge different generations. We have younger students, I think many of them probably your age, work with our older adults for a lot of our digital training programs. And so it's like one of those unique ways where like we can get two generations together to kind of work on, I guess, intergenerational differences, right? Because a lot of times older adults will learn differently than younger people. But then at the same time, also it's a common theme because a lot of these students are like international students, right? Where they have parents who are like first gen or or 1.5 gen. And so they see the similar struggle when they're like learning how to like use a computer, similar to like how their parents were like learning how to like navigate the country. And so like I think that's like one of the common themes that we've seen, and personally I've seen, which is like when people are kind of together and they're kind of in it for this one struggle, and they kind of see similarities, commonalities, and that really brings people together. And people are kind of able to work through a lot of their differences and their struggles.
I think I think a lot of intention and planning has to go into thinking about building solidarity amongst generations, because we're having problems building solidarity across races, right? And having even Asians acknowledge like inter-Asian racism, right? Like, I mean, I think even dating, the most commonplace example is like dating Chinese men in my life. Their parents were like, oh, she's Vietnamese. She is not good enough for us. So there's like the divide between Northwest, Northeast Asians, Southeast Asians, and also there's a South Asian community too. And so I think even these issues haven't been addressed. The closest example recently, I saw Asian Health Services, shout out to them, out in Oakland. They did a project funded by New Breath Foundation, which is led by a formerly incarcerated man, Eddie Zhang. And they brought a lot of the elderly Asians in Chinatown who had a lot of fear and concerns around safety, and kind of educated them about kind of San Quentin prison, about the prison pipeline, did some exchanges between the Asian and Black community, and they did a documentary about I think it's called Love is Twice, or you can love in two different ways. And so that is the greatest like Asian Black solidarity work I've seen, in addition to intergenerational work, because the folks leading it inside of Asian Health Services were young folk who really wanted to bridge that divide. And so I think those kind of projects where there's art, there's community building, there's connection, and there's intentional thought into some education and collective learning together is where we need to go. And it's not on social media, it's kind of in person. And I do think the political lessons of November, doesn't matter what side you are on, it shows that the in-person interaction. I know I debated with you, John, about it. I was just like, this generation is more digital, it's more exciting, but he was like, in-person interaction is really needed. We are dehumanized. But I agree. In the end, like, that is how we change hearts and minds, is by breaking bread, sitting across from each other, having these human connections and conversations. And AI is wonderful. There's so many different products, but in terms of bridging all of these differences in our community, we will need to just sit across from the table with each other and do some old-fashioned conversation. We call ours we have 2 field locations in Florida and Georgia. We have tea talks with NAPOP members, and we talk about sensitive issues like birth control, access to reproductive health care, with those who are NAPOP members, usually NHPI, young women, and some older women who are retired, and have those conversations, because it's through those conversations where you can educate and talk to each other and kind of feel out the left and right of politics and policy, and what change means for you in your neighborhood, in your neck of the woods. And I think the No Kings rallies were a demonstration of how local people are coming together and lifting up a theme, a common theme, right? I'm seeing like grandmothers and aunties sitting outside with young students and their signs. And so I think that is another case example of how people can unite, but it has to be in your neighborhood. It has to be in your backyard, and not as much on social media, but in person.
We have a question. How many of you have ever felt like a foreigner here in the United States? I'm gonna say here in the United States.
Yeah.
Seems like the majority, but some people are like not sure, okay? How many people have felt like you've been accused of falling in, well, that people have stereotyped you in a model minority manner, i.e. as in they assume that you're good in math and science or some technical field? Okay, still about the majority. I'm curious because certainly for, I think all of us growing up, certainly for me growing up, that was like one thing that united the Asian American community. We were always seen as foreigners. We were always seen as the math and science geeks or whatever you want to say, right? But I was curious because obviously, now Asian Americans are 10% of the population, or sorry, 7% of the population, but here in the metropolitan areas are 15, 20% oftentimes. So I wasn't sure if people still feel the same way, right? Especially the younger generation, because this is important, like how we talk about our Asian community, how we connect. So it seems like the perpetual foreigner notion still connects us in some ways, right? The model minority sort of stereotype still connects us in some way. So that's important to know. The other thing that I always think about is like, how do we continue to celebrate differences while promoting inclusion? Right, because this is a lot of whether it's about generations, whether it's about cultures, it's like we're different. We are different, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But then there are those that are saying that you guys are putting too much emphasis on being different. You guys are putting yourselves into different tribes. And how do we break that down? Like for me, like sometimes people talk about America as a melting pot. I don't believe in this analogy. And maybe you've heard me talk about this before.
I heard the story. Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't believe in a melting pot for America. And the reason I don't is this notion of a melting pot says that we all come together and become this better thing, this better food. But to be part of this better food, we all melt into this one American identity. I don't believe in that because when you say you melt, that means you give away some of your identity and that you become this oneness. What I believe in is what I call a tossed salad, which is we retain our own ingredients, right? We all still retain our own identities, but in coming together, we form a better entity. I don't like to eat romaine lettuce on its own, but you put it with some, at least for me, olives, tomatoes, cucumbers, hey, that's pretty good, right? And I think at least I want us to have that kind of a vision. It doesn't have to be that vision, right? Of how we celebrate differences across generations, differences across cultures, differences around immigration status, socioeconomic status, and how that makes us more powerful as a unit. And so I think that's the big question for all of us is how do we have those conversations? How do we recognize those? How do we have, again, empathy and grace for those and celebrate those?
Thank you. A lot of that was resonating with me as you guys were talking. Some of the things I was jotting down was the importance of being really intentional when you're speaking and conversing and meeting across difference, really showing up and coming together, in person, breaking bread, how that can be really powerful. And everything you were saying about, am I Filipino enough? Am I American enough? Like growing up in a, predominantly white community and being like the only Asian person in my school, people didn't really understand what to do with me. But then going to American University, joining the Phil-Am groups, it was really amazing to see the diversity of, all the different experiences, but there were some shared things we had, like YouTubers that we listened to or food we loved. So I think it's just all like another reminder that these labels, it might sound cliche, but these labels, these stereotypes about what generational cohort you fall into, or which immigration generation you're in, those don't have to define you. It's inherently limiting. There is such a wide, vast array of experiences that we all have. And the more that we can continue to just be cognizant of that as we walk about our daily lives and navigate conversations, have grace with each other, the better off that we'll all be. I know we're at 7:03 now, and I want to make sure we have time to hear from all of you guys. So I just will end with one last quick one, for you guys to all answer. If there's one thing that you want everyone to take away from the conversation today, what would it be? I know,
Wasn't everybody?
John, maybe,
John,
oh
you
yeah.
start.
It's on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I probably already said what I wanted to say, in the sense, I think part of it is just listening, part of it is just celebrating our differences and finding.
Sensors.
Oh, it might be the
Everybody get
sensors.
up.
Oh, the sensor.
Everybody get up and kind of, wow, yeah.
Audience.
There we go, alright,
Don't
yeah.
move. The back didn't want to move.
Well,
Yeah, I was the back of the classroom person.
Another stereotype about Asian Americans, I don't know.
Being in the back.
No, I have the reverse, right? Anyway.
Yeah, I was always in the back sleeping.
No, it is, it's about sort of, part of this for me, it is about like being comfortable with yourself and then also taking that to the people around you. Whether it is the people that are older than you, the people that are younger than you. And then thinking about the commonalities, thinking about how sort of to bring people in, right? And then I always think that well, maybe not obviously, but my organization is a pretty progressive organization. But like I do constantly think about like how do I bring conservatives in, right? How do I bring people that disagree with me in? And so it's not just about generations, right? And it is finding common language. I mean, like one of the things that I still do to this day that will not resonate with anyone. It's like I talk about looking up someone in my Rolodex. You guys have no idea what a Rolodex is, right? Right. Because a Rolodex is something that literally you put business cards in, that a thing that rolled around on your desk so that you could find their phone numbers and stuff like that, right? So like making sure that you're using terms that make sense to people and then recognizing where people are. I mean, we talked about sort of how people work much more on cell phones or remotely and how for me in person just feels so much more natural. But it's also about understanding that's where we're going. Like I get mad at my daughter for being on her cell phone all the time. And then I think to myself, well, that's how she communicates with her friends. It's not that she's surfing social media. Yeah, she does that too. But like, it's about communicating with her friends. For me, like, we literally had landline telephones that we picked up. That's how we communicated. And my parents would yell at me for being on the phone too much. It's not that much different at the end of the day, but it's just a different means. And so taking a step back and remembering that, and then giving, sort of remembering that before you get mad or impatient with whether it's someone older than you or someone younger than you.
Yeah, I was gonna just piggyback off of what John said. Like, I think a lot of it is just having genuine conversations where you're understanding the other's perspective, right? Because a lot of times when I'm working with older adults, right, it's maybe a little bit more hands-on instruction. It's like printing it out, having a physical copy, a lot more in person rather than digital. And even with my parents, like I remember when I went up to Boston for 4th of July, they're like, hey, like we have the best spot for fireworks. I was like, oh, can you just send me the link on Google Maps? I just pin it. And they're like, how do I do that? Like, and then my dad went to MapQuest. I don't know if you guys know what MapQuest is. He printed the address. He was like, it's somewhere.
Print out my direction.
Exactly. Like
road atlas.
even my parents now, when they come to visit me in DC, my dad has all the directions printed out, even though he has the GPS and I've taught him how to use the phone to do it. But it's just like, understanding their perspective, right? Especially when it's intergenerational. It's just so important because once you do and you understand like they're kind of like a part of that environment that they grew up in, it makes things so much more understandable and also gives you a lot of patience when you're a caregiver.
I think the main thing that I'm thinking now is that the world is falling into a very horrible binary, right? Everything is completely Republican or Democrat. I remember talking to him about when Clayton I was at AJC, we would call Clayton and say, Clayton, we need your help talking to Senator Hatch or the Republicans, and
Clay's my
he would
boss.
do it. He was the boss. And he was the boss back then too, or Floyd at JCL, and we would easily get entree into their offices and talk about immigration reform in ways we cannot. So that's also a binary that's really troubling and I think really dangerous for our times. I think the binary of man and woman is dangerous. I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, almost and a 10-year-old. They're not taught like that anymore. And so I think the binary around gender expansive is going to change because the children are already changing. But the polling is terrible, and because those who are older had the say in the election, but it's going to change. People are fluid. And I think just in general, I think when the world becomes binary and there's only, a certain like a conflict between two, it becomes not navigable and it becomes really difficult to make change. And so I would say force yourself to think outside of that. I think push yourself, push your brain, push beyond your normal sources of information, push beyond the normal sources of people you talk to. Being in the State Department really, and working in Homeland Security. I mean, I spent years arguing with the attorneys inside Homeland Security. They had told me for years they did not believe non-citizens fit into the Constitution. They believed that people meant citizens. They had been telling me for years. So when this birthright citizenship thing happened, I was like, oh. So, I mean, there's a whole half of America, that many progressive nonprofits in DC do not talk to or understand. And so, and it's not, and it's just, and people who are not in the echelon of doctors, lawyers, nonprofit, educated, those with college degrees. And so if you really deeply care about this work, we probably shouldn't be talking to each other as much. We should talk more to other people who we don't understand, who we don't know, who maybe we feel the most discomfort with. And so that is one thing. I just push yourself as far as you can, because I think it's going to matter in the next decade, whether you are all able to push yourselves, and we'll help you. But that's the thing I'm hoping you come away with.
Thank you. That was very powerful. I feel very inspired. We have a wealth of knowledge and experience up here. They're all have been very gracious with their time, but I want to open it up to you guys to ask any questions, or Anna, if there's anything online, or whoever's moderating the chat. Feel free to raise your hand or just start speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, would you recommend for some actionable next steps to get more involved or to I guess to make big change? What are some more actionable next steps?
Anyone want to take that one?
The fact that you're here is a first step, right? And it's staying in touch with your colleagues here. And the thing is, that's the beauty of all of this, is you could almost do anything as long as if you want to be part of the Asian American community, you could do it through so many different ways. You could do it through the arts, you could do it through literature, media, etc. It doesn't have to be through policy, so although all of us would encourage it, it doesn't have to be through this sort of lens. And then I would say start small. The best way to do it, I think you told a little bit about your story, it's just going to events. And then at some point you go to enough events, people will volunteer you for something, right? You do a decent job at volunteering for that, then they want you to make you an officer of something, right? And then after that, it's another organization, oh, you're involved in this, why don't you get involved in ours? That's how literally, that's sort of how it happens.
Yeah. LinkedIn is very powerful these days, I have to say. I'm following so many different people. You can follow people without having to be friends with them. And so I follow everyone. And there's a lot of lists.
Well, I think that's dated too. Probably it's more like Instagram and things, right? I don't know.
Because there's a lot of job hunters on there, but I do think there's a lot of social impact and policy work on LinkedIn that you can learn about. And then all the volunteer opportunities I see are being posted there more than on idealist.org, which used to be the main platform for finding internships and volunteer. But I see LinkedIn is really more exciting because there's an interactive format. People can post about their personal journey there, they can post about a job, but add in their own comment about it. And so I think that's a much more interactive format. Before you join nonprofits, you should figure out the background of that nonprofit. You can go on Glassdoor. There's so many pods where you can learn about nonprofits. I mean, usually the most unhappy people talk about that nonprofit, so you have to be aware of that. But at the same time, you should do your background research. I didn't know that some of the nonprofits I was at had a certain reputation, or the executive director had a certain reputation. You want to understand, because that reputation applies to you no matter what. Your boss's reputation applies to you in this town, actually, because you're working for that boss. You are the voice of that boss. That's very hierarchical, not as cool for this generation, I know, but that is the reality of this town. So, don't want to make a note of that. Am I right? I mean, it's very old school, but it's the truth. You're like, you're very old school. I got it from Karen.
And I think also just to continue building your network, like the more you build your network, the more opportunities, come your way. And so continuously meet people, especially when you're new to something, and ask them if you can grab coffee and pick their brain and learn about what they do. Because the more that you do that, the more you can understand, oh, like that might be a job that I want, that might be a volunteer opportunity that I would want to partake in. And then you can kind of navigate the world a little bit better and a little bit more efficient.
Thank you very much.
In the red, or, yeah.
Hi, so I feel like there's been a lot of really valuable discussion on how we kind of like talk about different policies, like social issues with people of different generations, but I feel like something that maybe like a lot of other people, that are like maybe like second gen or like 1.5 gen might relate to is, I feel like before we even get to that, like there is a communication barrier, and like I feel like I'm Chinese American. A lot of my friends, like their parents immigrated here, but like people in my generation, I feel like a lot of them might not have like fluent Mandarin, or like are fluent in their native tongue. And I feel like for me, I can talk with my parents conversationally, but like I really don't know like the terminology for a lot of these like policy issues. And like when it comes to communicating with like my grandparents, like they don't understand English, so I don't have that like leeway with them. And so like that is, there's like that. And then the other issue is like I feel like um a lot more people that maybe that like I interact with, I feel like they recognize that there is this language gap, and actively kind of want to like, I guess now that we're like in college, maybe actively want to like build those language skills, but it's like, I don't know, it's like more difficult. I feel like that's like kind of like a common like experience that a lot of people have. And I've also like thought a lot about like why that kind of like happens. Like there's so many layers to that. But I think it's just like, I guess what are your guys' take on that, and like how we kind of try to build that like initial communication gap?
I mean, I live with my mother-in-law. I wouldn't be able to have the career I did without her, to be honest. I can't afford childcare in DC. So my mother-in-law watches a lot of political YouTube, and she asks my husband and me to help her. And so a lot of times, he's in the government, he's not in policy and politics. I'm sitting there and I'm forcing myself to explain to her. I was like, oh, Trump did this because of this. And I'll ask him, like, what is the word for this? And so I think the main thing was like when I got made fun of a lot when I was speaking in Vietnamese at a professional level, people would laugh at me and say, you speak like a child. But I pushed myself past the humiliation and just spoke more in Vietnamese on policy. I'm actually a little better than what I was joking about. I do know more slang than you do in Chinese, but
Just said it.
but I did really push myself, and I think it's an active thing where I'm constantly trying to read in Vietnamese. And we started the first Vietnamese C4, which is a political progressive Vietnamese outfit, and we have a Viet Fact Check where we create blogs in Vietnamese about different issues to illustrate, oh, what is really in this reconciliation bill? How does it get Medicaid? And then some of the elderly in the progressive C4, they translate it as well. And so I think these type of organizations are the way to bridge, is like we need the translated materials, but in in our young language, but translated into their language. And so those are the modes in which, but I think especially when it comes to home conversations, I just push through the embarrassment of people laughing at me because I was once kind of talking at the first grade, but I have to say I'm now at the fifth or sixth grade level by just pushing through people are like laughing at me because I did the accent wrong and I said probably the wrong word, and used the wrong pronoun. So those are a couple of things.
I think also like technology is really powerful
Yes.
now. Because like a lot of times when I'm writing in Chinese, right, like I'm struggling sometimes to remember characters. And so a lot of times I use like, I don't know if you guys have used like Pleco, which is a really, really great app where you can use pinging for the actual characters or English and it can pretty much find stuff. But I've also because in that we do a lot of translation. And so we have a person that's dedicated to Chinese translation. I've asked her like, hey, like, how do you make your translations like more efficient and quicker? Like, is there something you use? And she literally told me I use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
She'll run it through ChatGPT and then she'll just make edits herself. And so it's like, even nowadays, the artificial intelligence is so good that like, if you're struggling to communicate, with certain types of vocabulary where you can literally run it through ChatGPT.
Sure.
And I've done it myself where, I just to test it, I've just like, with my elementary level Chinese, just like really written to it and just asked it questions and it would respond to me with like higher level proficiency than myself. And so it's like, I think that that's something that like a lot of people before, we're so used to using like Google Translate, we're like, oh, this translation's
Well,
terrible.
not bad in Vietnamese, actually. Yeah.
But like,
Come a long way.
Yeah, come a long way.
come a long way.
It's a crowdsources too,
Right.
yeah, in some ways.
But now it's like, it's just getting better and better.
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in with a quick tidbit because your question really resonated with me as well. I didn't speak Tagalog in the house or learn it growing up, but recently, like a couple months ago, I decided to start taking classes online because I think I've seen this a lot amongst my friends too, or in the diaspora, where it's like, I don't speak the language, but I'm really trying to kind of hang on to those cultural elements and connect with my grandma or just understand a little bit more about the culture by way of language. It's a really great way that can unite us. And I don't work in policy right now specifically myself or with NHPI communities, but I think when we talk about just like bridging gaps and understanding each other, I think language can be very, very powerful for that. But did you have anything to add? Okay.
I see other questions. So.
Yeah, and I know, Hannah, I know we were a little bit late with the food. Can we get like, we still go through? Okay.
First of all, thank you all for taking time out of your day to come speak with us. My question is about having conversations with like older generations in the AA and HPI communities. Specifically, like the last takeaways you all said were how it's important to be open-minded and like have conversations with people. My question is about sort of misinformation and how, especially like Victor, you mentioned how a lot of older adults like require digital literacy classes. And sort of how do we like navigate misinformation online when older generations of A and HPI individuals might not like be able to distinguish between what is like fact versus like what is misinformation, especially when a lot of what's hyper partisan right now is rooted in like a disagreement on what is reality.
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, our organization does quite a bit of work on misinfo, disinfo in the Asian American space. And you're right, it's hard. Like, and especially with the older generation, especially if it's your older relatives, you want to, again, approach it with care. Because, like, if you just simply say, well, that's wrong, that's false, they're going to turn off, right? And they're like, well, I saw it, right? It's better to say, well, are you sure about that? Or where did you see that? It's like how, and I, and this is sort of a Chinese trait, I think. It's not, as some Asian traits translate, some don't. A Chinese trait is I typically don't, depends on what part of China too, there's diversity there, but like one trait that I have is I don't directly disagree. I will never say you're wrong. It's like, well, I'm not sure about that. I read somewhere else that this is true, right? And then also be open. Like I actually had this debate with this person that told me, well, in the United States is adding 8 million illegal immigrants a year. Like this came from a Chinese guy. And I was like, I don't think that's right. But then since I knew him, I actually went up and research it. And in fairness to him, the gross number of undocumented entries per year is estimated to be about 8 million. But the additional amount of undocumented immigrants in the United States is basically flat line, as in there's a net zero, maybe there's an addition of 100,000 or so. So then I was able to say, hey, you know what? You're right about that number, but actually what you're saying, right? His point was we're getting flooded with undocumented immigrants. But your general point about us being flooded is wrong. So it's like taking that kernel of truth, because most misinformation has a kernel of truth, and debunking it in a way that is understandable.
We have to educate them about their sources. We have to talk about independent YouTubers. We have to talk about YouTube that's affiliated with news sites. So we do that with my mother-in-law. We're like, OJI is okay. That's a site that's valid, VATV, or we'll ask her where she found it from, and she'll say, this doctor. I'm like, no, that's an independent person. That's not verified stuff. So I think there's some education we have to do on like sources. I do think there is some debunking that needs to be disseminated broadly. I don't think a lot of our organizations have quite got the hang of the mass viral piece of getting information out to counter the other side as much, to be quite
We
frank.
don't do a good job of flooding the
don't-
market on the other side.
We're
That's the
not
problem.
flooding the
Right.
zone, don't flood the zone very well. I think there's a lot of work on digital ads to try to kind of get certain facts or messages out there as well. But that costs a lot. That's very resource intensive too. So I do think at the grassroots, it's just educating people about such the wide array of sources of information. And asking them to check and verify that and figure out ways to do that. But it's gonna get a lot worse, because I think there's AI manufactured, there's clickbait, and all sorts of things. And so we've definitely I think we definitely have to improve our tools on educating our communities about all the different sources of information and what information is what and such, so.
And this is where you all can help too. It's like, if just each of you do your part in sort of liking factual media, forwarding factual media, or whether it's reposting, I won't say retweeting, reposting, right? That's gonna help, because like the algorithms will always help, like, help that critical mass. The more that things get reposted, the more the algorithm pick up on it, and it'll gather steam, right? So like that's part of it. And you're right, I mean, like we're too old school and thinking about earned media. We should just pay for us to get some extra posts. I mean, we can. That's what they do, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
right.
Also, I think some of the social media CEOs have some accountability
Oh,
though.
yeah. There's-
But that's another, issue that, maybe some of the dark money can address. I don't know, because that requires a lot of money and influence, I think, to influence that crowd.
I think also add on to your point, it's not just disinformation, but it's also scams for older adults.
Oh, yeah.
Cause like, with the disinformation, it's not great if someone is consuming information that's not accurate. But it gets really bad when people are susceptible to scams, and people have lost a lot of money from it. Like my parents text me all the time, like, oh my gosh, I forgot to pay my Easy Pass toll, and I'm like,
I'm getting those text messages too.
like, Mom, please do not
Click on
pay
it.
the Easy Pass toll.
Click on it. Yeah, I'm getting those texts too.
We got a question back there.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's questions on mine that needs to be taken before. Are there any virtual questions or no? Someone? I have some. Okay, yeah, because I have 3 questions.
One last concluding remark, actually, before I forget.
Oh, sorry.
Put it into one.
No,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, sure.
Okay, wait.
Maybe Sierra's.
No, did you-
Sorry, before I forget my thought, I just want to say AARP on the scam point. I just want to hammer home how important it is to just be aware and cognizant, and to really, as our generation has grown up with phones in our hands, basically, we are so digitally literate. And because of the pace of technology and AI, it's getting easier than ever for bad actors to do really horrible things. So the extent to which we can all educate ourselves and our loved ones, and just keep supporting reputable sources, et cetera, I please encourage you all to do that. That's a big focus of AARP's advocacy work around fraud watch and scams. But please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. My name is Yaris. I'm not in college. I actually just joined the PC government like 8 months ago. And so I used to work in a lot of the private side and nonprofit side. So this is directly working in local government. So I'm almost like there are many things I've seen in the local government that makes me wonder why I'm there working there. And so I was curious to join the talk today because mainly because I feel like DC specifically, I moved here 2 years ago, that is we're very white and black and white in terms of like race, in terms of how things are being talked about. Even I work in equity, so I'm one of the few that still work in equity within the local government. And so I think that's one of the things where from a Asian American perspective, I guess my question is, how hard is it to advocate for the Asian American community or Asian community in the Hill right now? And then from your perspective, given that perhaps that it's harder, like what are some of the challenges you are facing? And then the second part of my question is, what I have observed, because I worked under the equity piece, is in the transportation piece, is that how do we get more people who are perhaps our generations or like our parents or grandparents' generations to be more involved in doing a 311 call, right? Because oftentimes the reason like a lot of the DC agency, they look at 311 in order to take action, right? So that's how we get our streets being taken care of. I think you mentioned about like mobility, right? A lot of them is because we don't have data from certain communities. So I'm curious what are ways to involve more like a basic public service so that we are able to get our voice more heard. So kind of put it all together.
I just want to say
It's very long.
I just want to say I love 311. I call it all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like a lot non-police emergency numbers there, like garbage collection.
Streets, if you wanna curbsides, you have a pothole that you need to be fixed. And there's a lot of things that 311, it's the main data source that the city agency.
I'm so millennial, I don't like calling things.
There's a.
I only want to go to the app, yes.
That's
That's the millennial side of me.
I think that like, educating people about like, what's going on in the Hill has been interesting. Like, I think that like NAPCA has definitely changed the way we message. Now we don't really talk a lot about like, I guess, the DEI perspective, where it's like, hey, like, this is specifically helping Asian American older adults, but we focus more on like income security, for example, like, hey, like this is a job training program that we have that's designed to help older adults get back to work. So I think that like when there's shifts in the administration, shifts on the Hill, the messaging changes, but the mission is the same. And so like that's something that we are very cognizant of, I guess, like the reality of the environment that we're a part of.
I mean, the Hill was a confused mess for a while after January 20th. They were upset. I would say the minority was definitely very confused. There was kind of an information black hole in the majority in terms of getting information from the majority for many progressive organizations. We have a lobby firm that actually is at the Hill all the time. Like we cannot sustain ourselves. So we have to hire out. So they're kind of our eyes and ears. And then my staff, they maintain maybe a group of 25 members that we really talk to a lot about women's health issues or immigration issues or issues on race and justice. I think we have to stand for something. And I think the only way to win is if we still talk about racial equity. I think the Tri-Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, they are trying to like speak up about immigration, about race, and they were really upset about DEI. They pushed the minority leader on that, and John's probably more on the DEI because the civil rights groups are speaking, but I know on abortion and on immigrant access to healthcare, we're still pushing on our ideals. However, we have materials on economic justice, as Victor said, where most of the congressional staffers are telling us they're using their wage gap data in terms of the difference between how much an API woman is paid compared to a white man. Like they say they use that data almost every week, right? Because that kind of economic reality is stuff that their members love to talk about. Judy Chu, Grace Mang, Pramil Jayapal, they all love to talk about it, right? Because it's part of their identity, it's their lived experience. So those are the members we're closest to, but those are not necessarily the members in power. Right, and so building our relationships with committee chairs of jurisdiction has been a bit of a focus, not committee chairs, but minority ranking members too. But also working with our lobby to kind of get a feel. They have a Republican partner that tries to get information from the administration and from the majority ranking leadership and committees as well. But I will have to tell you, as a progressive organization, it's challenging. And it's an attack against nonprofits. As you know, the IRS is going to go after our tax status, even though they're granting exceptions to faith-based institutions. The IRS, the Homeland Security just sent out 215 oversight letters against nonprofits that, work on immigration, asking if we ever use federal government to help undocumented people. So they're weaponizing the government against the nonprofit sector. And so there's a vast group of attorneys in the private sector, Democracy Forward. John is part of this group, I am part of this group, where we're trying to gather the resources to fight back, to litigate back, to push back, to act in solidarity with each other in this way where they're weaponizing the government against the very forces of progressive change. And so that is going to be one of our biggest challenges at the Hill moving forward. And I think there's a challenge to nonprofit groups from members of Congress about who our base is, who our community is, who we represent, because a lot of lessons learned from November really gave members certain impressions about nonprofits and what we represent. So we're going to have to keep on dealing with those challenges and bringing our people and our communities to the Hill and doing in-person visits with members in their district to show up in their communities. So that they see the proof of our work. We cannot just focus on our work in DC as much, right? We've got to really be on the ground with our partners as well. And so we, like John, we give a couple million to 9 gender justice partners as well. And we subgrant out to folks in the community because they are the ones who are meeting their members in the district. And a lot of them have mentioned that they're not going to act on something unless they hear from someone in their constituency. Whereas before it was a lot of DC's sausage making. I don't know.
Yeah, I chuckle a little bit because in the sense that I'm gonna say it, I don't really fear this administration. I mean, you're right, they're gonna try to come after us. Let them, right? And I'll admit, I come from a place of privilege at an organization where sort of we feel good about where we stand. We feel good about our finances. We sort of we're ready for this, right? That's why we're litigating against them, because if they want to come after us, they can come after us, and they're there, right? With respect to sort of how we talk about this, so I don't use the acronym DEI. I never really have, and even now, even more so. And at the same time, I use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have told my staff, do not back away from those words. The reason is we stand for equity. The other side stands for unfairness. We stand for inclusion. The other side stands for exclusion. We stand for diversity. The other side stands for homogeneity. Terrible, last word, terrible word. I need to come up with a buzzier word than that. But anyway, those are our values, right? And so we need to live by those. Now, being an Asian American on the Hill, one thing I will say is we all constantly are code switching. And I think that's all of you, I am sure, already in life do that. Depending on what community you're in, you talk about yourself differently. You talk about your experiences differently. That's wired into our system. And I think that's actually not a bad thing. I know sometimes it doesn't feel comfortable because we feel why can't we just be who we are? But who we are is already pretty complex. So being able to talk about it in complex, nuanced ways, I'm okay with that. And how that translates, so on the Hill, right? Sometimes we do talk to our progressive members or talk to the Asian Pacific American Caucus in a different way than I would even talk to the Democratic Caucus or Democratic leadership. And certainly a different way than I talk to like the Lisa Murkowski's or the Susan Collinses of the world, let alone, you know, Mitch McConnell's weird now. I mean, he's kind of one of our supporters, right? So like,
Yeah.
I know. So being able to talk in different ways that, again, this goes to like, when we talk to our elders, we need to talk in a language that they can understand, right? So it's the same, I think the same idea that we really want to do. And I think that's the last thing I would say is that's why having a diverse set of experiences helps. So like when I was at a law firm, at that point, it was a pretty conservative law firm. So like at some Hill meetings, I used to, when John Ashcroft was Attorney General, he got vetted by one of my partners at my law firm. So the first thing I said with a meeting with John Ashcroft was, I'm a former attorney at Wiley Ryan Fielding. He's like, oh, nice to meet you. If I had said I'm an attorney with Asian American Justice Center, they'd be whatever, right?
They were on the bad list.
Right, well, yeah. So like, and having worked at a company called Illinois Tool Works, whenever I meet someone from Illinois, I'm like, hey, I used to work at an Illinois company. Using those connections, right, to start a conversation, that's not being false to who you are, but it will help open doors, open a conversation that you might not otherwise have.
I think that's a nice way to end it, unless there are any burning questions, but I want to make sure you all have time to fill out the survey and mingle with each other, maybe come up and ask any questions to the speakers, but I want to thank the speakers again for all the time and all the insights that you shared. I've learned a lot. I've also learned a lot from all the insightful questions you guys asked. You guys are, taking a great step being here today, showing up, meeting each other, doing the work that you're doing, so thank you all. And I think I'll pass it back over to Hannah or.
Okay, let's give a big round of applause. So, have an audience survey. This will only take like 2 to 3 minutes to fill out. Please do fill out the survey, because you completing the form helps keep our program running year on year. And then for our virtual attendees, we'll not be. And then, while y'all are filling out the survey, I will also take a group picture with all of our lovely panelists, if that's okay. Do you guys mind having your name sent out, or would you prefer to have them?
Either way.
Okay.
And would they take off your name tags and stutter in a hole?
Yeah.
Oh,
I never even think about these.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, and I'll take one more just in case. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you. And then I think, Shama, do you want to close this out?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome.
that way we'll have a little bit more time to network as you wind up. You all can just start filling that survey out. And I just want to thank everyone, Victor, to John, for your thoughtful conversation. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight, both in person, for all of those of you who are here this evening, and for those who joined us online by our Zoom. If you enjoyed this 4th WLP session, well, it's the 5th, no? Yeah, 5th, okay, there we go. 5th WLP session of the summer. We've got one more session, our last final session to go, which will be next Wednesday evening. Change starts with one voice on July 16th. And it will be at the Washington English Center. We've posted there before as well. And we'll send, the information for the venue to those who've registered. You can register on our website on capal.org and also follow us on social media to learn more about our S&I program at CAPAL DC. Thank you to our 2025 sponsors for your continued support for our program. And thank you for attending this 5th WLP session. So we'll wind this up with the survey, and then we still have a little bit of time if you'd like to network or have some individual questions for our panelists as we close out the space. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes. I learned the next one.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, super fun. We gotta get into the hair fight next time.
All right. Yeah.
We gotta aspire, get to the next level.
Like that, you're right. Yeah. That's right. Have a good juicy debate.
I'm feeding you this way, but you're welcome to grab food and then there's a microwave.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to run home to the kids in a bit. Yeah,
Grab some.
yeah, I'm just gonna be a senior in high school next year, so I'm trying to extend.
Hey, I
I'm
was
also
gonna say,
Victor. Nice to meet
it's
you.
so rare to see another Victor.
Yeah.
It's like a name that everyone knows of, but nobody
Nobody has it. And then you mentioned prior that coffee chats, like great opportunity to like.
Yeah.
So
Huh? Economics and politics, or NYU too, huh?
I
Victor
like,
Yang.
I think that's like
Victor Yang. So, I didn't go to NYU, but I went to Syracuse. So,
right.
yeah.
Well, I'd love to meet a little bit soon.
Victor.
Where are you actually based?
July 20.
Right now I'm based in DC. So yeah, I'm here for 8 years.
Yep.
You.
No, so we
Yeah,
have a deep
It's good,
outline.
it's good.
My.
I have some thoughts, you know, we can talk about it later, but, I think it's a great place for young persons to. It's, this might be a little more of a
So
challenging
that's about the
time.
same time.
Yeah, I totally get
And then
that.
I have.
Yeah.
So let's get in contact.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, very nice meeting you.
Rough draft of the. Perfect, that's what they were from the organization.
I didn't know about the supplemental.
Yeah, so I heard you guys talking about different ideas in law. I want to hear more about you talk about that.
What kind of ideas are you hoping to get out of that?
It's sort of like why don't you like the idea of Chinese baby, the lawyer, and why would you be advocate for?
I honestly think that you should go to law school is a lot more expensive. AI will take over a lot of duties. Paralegals are now paid six figures to do a lot of the work. I think I outsourced 80% of my immigration work to my paralegal. So I think the law school is gonna get more expensive because of inflation. Your return is gonna be not great unless you go into corporate law. And only 10% of the class goes to good law and makes that amount of money. And so the value proposition is no longer there. Things are gonna change, their business model will transform. And so for a lot of people that want to go to public policy can get a master public policy. But I would recommend MBA because a lot of people want to be leaders too eventually in their field. And to do that, you have to have a business, run a nonprofit, run a hospital, run a business, do a startup, or do your own business, which I see a lot of young people doing that. So I would have gone for an MBA and a JD if I could have, you know. So, but if you want to be a judge and you want to be a big law firm, go to law school. But or litigator, just enough. If you want to do public policy, I would reconsider.
So, contrary to what we were gonna do, I would agree with a lot of it, right? I mean, I think the big thing is like what the return on investment is. Because you're right, I think the return on investment is great. But then the question is like, I do think that law is still such a good flexible between, right? It does, especially in DC, it does still have a certain cafe, right? And it gives a lot of fun. It's like I never would have wanted to figure out, but then I did it, and it was a good experience. And like I said, like the number of connections I made through there, for the different insights that I got from that process. To the in-house opportunity was another set, right? Yeah, so like I think there are opportunities there. I do think you know, whether it's worth it just to go to law school, I'm not sure, but like the education that you get in law school, it doesn't so much become a lawyer. I agree with that, right? Like the application you stack, right? But the way you think, you have to professors and how you analyze problems, I think it's hard. So that's the other thing that I think is valuable about that. But it is, I mean, it's certainly this day and age, and a couple of years after you graduate, don't go straight to law school. I went straight to law school, it worked out fine, but I would not. I would not recommend.
I don't recommend it.
Spend a couple of years, explore a little bit, and then if you still think.
Don't like it, fine, but try to get a study abroad. It'll get me credit. Yeah. And get leadership.
Even
Yeah.
at med school now, like most med students, you have to figure out.
Thank you. Hi. Do you want to talk to him or? Oh, okay.
Fun fact, I actually used to work at Facebook and.
Oh, great.
I started watching, reading Fearless, whatever that book that woman from Facebook.
Yeah, I
Fearless
mean, I got laid off, but part of my role was in fundraising, and both organizations were part of like my portfolio. Someone to do out. Both organizations. So I knew about both organizations.
Oh, now I'm an agency.
Non-profit agencies. That's just a fun fact, you know, how to say use your past experience to start a conversation.
Right, there you go.
Well, like that was
There you go,
good.
that's a good one.
Yeah, but, yeah, I'm just wondering in terms of like your whole organization, given that I'm just like, just trying to figure out, get a little bit more involved in terms of like, the community, just because I feel like it's very rare that, like, I think this is one of the that has been focusing on API. How to see in terms of politics or
It is a little bit,
it's a little more isolated, I feel like, compared to like San Francisco, New York, where you can. And so I feel like I was just trying to figure out what are some of the ways I can like do a little outside in terms of like public services, like encourage like more people to like understand. Because I think that's the word thing now, like unless I generate a government idea of how yeah, so I'm curious if your organization has any volunteers, if you're looking for help or anything, just to see what are some ways to be involved.
right, so actually, like, so you're talking about really DC proper, not so much even Maryland, Virginia.
No.
Okay, okay, so,
But I'm personally outside of my work. I am interested in like women in gender, but also like.
right, so things like DC proper, one organization that I would recommend that you get in touch with was APA, called APA LRC. So it's just like APA LRC.org.
Yeah, they were really great.
They are- Right, and I'll admit, I have a vested interest in it. They're also another organization I was involved in, but they provide legal services to the DC proper community. They do translation services, and they are based in DC. They used to get some funding from the DC government. And so like, they are connected in all cities. So that would be one place. Now, I don't know if you're, if you don't mind me trying to